Well, welcome back to another edition of Sacred Conversations. I'm Steve Youngkite, and I am joined this week by Tony Lyons, who is the chair of the board of Hope Partnership, an organization that works to provide affordable housing in towns all along the Connecticut shoreline. We will dive into the conversation shortly, but I want to take this opportunity to frame the discussion just a little bit. Over the past month, our country has been convulsed by the image of George Floyd being murdered by a white police officer. And it has led to protests and demonstrations and discussions about police brutality and white supremacy, about inequality, and about so much more. It has led many people into a new awareness of the profound racial inequities that exist in our country. And it's led many people to interrogate the mechanisms that have historically led to those inequities. But more than that, it's leading many people to address means of overcoming the disparities that exist between predominantly white communities and those that are predominantly Black or brown. And that involves thinking about things like policing and education and transportation, and how community resources can be shared and spread around various communities. But it also involves issues of housing. Lack of affordable housing along the Connecticut shoreline, but really throughout the entire state, is one of the primary reasons that our communities remain functionally segregated. Research released recently by the Connecticut Mirror suggests that Connecticut is one of the most segregated states in the country, second only to Mississippi, which is a stunning realization. Well, Hope Partnership is one of the organizations that is actively addressing that need and that disparity. They have had some wonderful success in introducing affordable housing to many shoreline communities, and in one particular case, a case that's very close to home, they've had a rather demoralizing setback that they're still working through. Now, I'll let Tony share those stories in the course of our conversation, but for now, Tony, let me say just how grateful I am to have you here and how grateful I am for the work that you do. So thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this conversation.
Happy to be here, Steve, and thank you for the invitation. And, I really I give a lot of credit to you and the church to have these kinds of conversations, because sometimes they're not that easy to have, and they're, they, like you said, they hit close to home and make ourselves look ourselves in the mirror sometimes and say, what are we doing to solve these larger global problems that we're facing right now?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's exactly it. Well, let me ask you to start by introducing Hope Partnership and introducing the work a little bit more and sharing maybe its history and how it came into being.
Sure.
How did it come into the world?
I love talking about hope and the history of hope, because it's really it's a great story. And just a slight clarification: I'm no longer the chair.
You're not the chair. Okay,
Of the
sorry.
board. I'm still a volunteer, but we have term limits on our board.
I see.
And so I was the previous past president, termed off. I'm still active as a volunteer. I suspect that after a year goes by, I probably will be asked to come back on the board.
Good.
And the president is now a guy by the name of Dave Carswell, who is the manager at the Guilford Savings Bank branch in Old Saybrook. He's doing a great job, and I think you might be listening to this. We've got a bunch of great volunteers and really committed people that have been circling around hope since the very beginning. And so to answer your question, we started. We are in many ways a faith-based organization. We started in the basement of St. Paul Lutheran Church in Old Saybrook in around 2003, where a number of people got together who were concerned about the fact that there were homeless families living in motels along the Boston Post Road, up and down the shoreline, not just in Old Saybrook. And they were kids in those households that were in our schools. They were riding the school bus every morning, and people were concerned about that. But it kind of led to a larger conversation about the affordability issue in general in our area, and how we have young adults who grew up here and went to one of our great colleges in Connecticut and then can't afford to live here and they move somewhere else. Or we have our workforce that, we need to work in our stores and restaurants and doing services that are important. And we have volunteers who work for the fire department or EMTs, again, having difficulty finding options for where they can live around here. And it's hurting the recruitment to fire departments and other volunteer organizations. So there's a whole kind of host of issues that kind of came together, and people said, well, you know what, let's see if we can start an organization that can maybe take this on. And personally, I'm involved in financing affordable housing as a profession. I work for an organization called the Local Initiative Support Corporation, or LISC, which is a national organization based in New York that works with nonprofit organizations all over the country in 48 cities. And so I'm somewhat familiar with this, and somebody at the church knew that I did this and asked me to come to that meeting, that first meeting. And that's always the mistake you make, is you go to that first meeting, as you know, Steve, and you can never extricate yourself. And that's kind of what happened. I kind of got sucked in and started to feel a lot of ownership for the effort. And we had Les Swenson was the pastor at St. Paul at the time. One of the co-founders, along with me, Mike Pace, who was the first selectman in Old Saybrook at the time, Kim Meadows, member of the church there. So there were a bunch of people that kind of came together and started the organization, and just looked around and said, what can we do to help solve the problem? We put together, helped the developer put together a small condominium project on College Street in New Haven, where the developer was willing to set aside some affordable units in exchange for a higher density on his project. And so he was able to put together a 6-unit project, and 2 of them became affordable. It's still there today, and it's a great little project. So that was kind of our first project. But I think getting back to your original comment about why the global issues and the issues around the wake of the George Floyd murder, and the fact that we do live in an area, in a state that is highly segregated, and the reasons for that are complicated. And one of the major drivers of that is the way we do our land use zoning. The way we in most of the small towns in Connecticut have single lot, single house zoning, so that if you want to build a house, you need to have, if you have a piece of land, you can only build one house on that piece of land. If it's an acre or 2 acres, that's very, very common around here. And so it makes it very hard for developers to build higher density or multifamily housing. Yeah. And, it comes wrapped up in language like, well, we're trying to preserve the character of our town. We're trying to keep the rural feel of the town. And that all sounds great. And, and that has sometimes been true, but it has had a unintended consequence of keeping people of lower incomes, moderate incomes, and racial and ethnic groups out of a lot of our small towns around Connecticut. And a lot of people feel that's a problem and that's an issue. And there's lots of talk right now about how that can be corrected. That Connecticut Mirror article you just mentioned was recently published. There's been some articles in the Hartford Courant recently about it. And the New York Times has written about how Connecticut is one of the worst examples of housing segregation in the country. So there's definitely an acknowledgement that it's an issue. And there are organizations like Hope and others that are trying to do something about it, but there has to be more support for it. There has to be more buy-in to how we can solve the problem.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to get into that. Tell me your history a little bit, in that, it might have been tempting for somebody to hear this story or hear this invitation to learn these facts about, folks living in, motels along the Boston Post Road, and to go, well, that's not my problem and I don't want to be a part of it. You had a different reaction, and your reaction was to say, that is an issue that I want to work on. What led you to that? Like what I don't know. What within your background, what within your I don't know, kind of your repertoire as a human being led you to go, you know, this is something that feels important to me morally and
Yeah. I don't know. It's a hard question to answer. You know, we all have to kind of follow our what our passion. And you know, I as an undergrad, I got a degree in social work, but I kind of got away from that and have been in finance. You know, working in real estate finance for the last 25 years.
yeah,
And you know, it's just I feel like you know I want to give back to the community where I live, where my kids grew up, and I want to set an example for my kids.
yeah.
And you know, and I've really been gratified by it's been you know 99% of the people I talk to are all for what we're talking about. Is a small minority of people that you know maybe have an issue with it and take issue with it. So I've been really gratified by the amount of people that have really gotten behind the idea, at least the idea. You know, everyone's busy. No one can put their time into it necessarily, but there's been a lot of support from local banks, from local churches, community groups. One of the things that Hope Partnership does is we have an education and advocacy committee, and we go around to different organizations and do presentations on the problem. And we, you know, we go to very mainstream organizations, Chamber of Commerce, the Lions Club, the Exchange Club, the school board, and you know, by and large, everybody, you know, agrees that this is something that is a problem, and we need to try and solve it. But you know, resources are tight right now, and trying to raise money, trying to get volunteers is always a challenge.
Yeah. I believe that. I can relate to that. So listen, tell me about, you know, Hope has had some, I think, some extraordinary success over the years, building projects and, you know, getting things done. It's, I mean, you've got, I think, a really wonderful track record.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what are, you know, what are the projects that you guys have been most proud of, and where can we go to see some of these if we wish to? I mean, they're attractive.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ferry Crossing is the one that we are most proud of. I'd say it was built in 2012 in Old Saybrook. It's right out on Ferry Road, right by the Baldwin Bridge.
Yes.
You can see Old Lyme from the property.
Right.
And it you know it was one of these things where we said to the town at the time, we want to do something. We need your help, and you have this piece of land that the town actually owned the land. They acquired it when they built the Baldwin Bridge, and it was like the staging area for the DOT when they built the bridge. And they gave it to the town, and the town didn't know what to do with it. And so we said, hey, you know what? Let's look at putting some housing there. And it became an issue, a little bit of an issue, because Parks and Rec wanted to use it for soccer fields. So we had to kind of broker a little bit of a deal with the Park and Rec department. We said, okay, how about if we take half of it for housing, and the other half we'll build a nice soccer field for the youth soccer program.
Yeah.
And everybody said that was great, and that's what happened. And so we built 16 units of housing that really looks great. It was designed by a local architect, Point One Architects, Old Lyme based.
Old Lyme,
and came out great. And I think most would agree, it's well managed. The people that live there contribute to the town. There's a couple of town employees that live there, a couple of town volunteers that live there. Most people that live there have some tie to the area. Either they have family in the area, they work in the area. And, you know, as a provider of affordable housing, we're obligated, and we want to market the units to people who refer to as least likely to apply. It's a kind of a fair housing term that requires owners to find, particularly property where it's financed with state and federal money. You have to reach out to people that are least likely to apply. So you have to go to places to attract people that may not necessarily think of living in Old Saybrook. And we did that. And, you know, for the most part, the people we ended up with are people that kind of had a tie to this area, even though we made lots of efforts to bring other people in. That's generally not how people behave.
Yeah, you need a tie before
People
before
want to be near their church, near their relatives, near their family, near their friends.
near their work.
Tends to be how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, exactly. Well, it's a beautiful complex. And then you have a complex in Essex as well, I believe.
Yeah, and very exciting news. We started construction just a month or two ago on a new project in Essex,
Yeah.
in Centerbrook.
Uh-huh.
We're taking a half vacant office building called Spencer's Corner. Been there since the 80s, and it's been struggling. It's because it's an office condo, and office condos just didn't really take off around here. And we are converting the second and third floor into loft style apartments.
Yeah.
The first floor will remain commercial. There's a dentist office, there's an optician. There's a great little coffee shop called Savor Cafe, which is in there.
Sure, sure.
Howard Bread is in there.
Yeah.
So they're all going to stay.
Yeah.
First floor, and the second and third floor we're converting into apartments. And got unanimous support from the town of Essex, from the neighbors. And the town is providing us, help with taxes and permit fees. And it's under construction now. It'll be open, we hope, towards the beginning of next year. 17 units, affordable to families and single people from 50% of the area median income up to 80% of the area median income.
Yeah.
So it's basically workforce housing for people that work in the area, grew up in the area, and need an option for a place to rent.
That's great. What a great location. I would live there.
We are
There.
absolutely right in the middle of town there. Elementary schools next door,
Great.
restaurants, shopping all right around there.
Yeah, and that cafe is beautiful. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's
We're very excited.
yeah. And are you able to talk about Madison? I mean, I know that's another.
Yeah.
Another.
Yeah, we just made this announcement recently. There'll be a press release going out soon, which I'll send over to you. But the town of Madison is working with us on a project. It's called the Wellington. It's a piece of land over near Hammonasset, kind of on the Clinton side of town. And it's the local builder wants to retire and wanted to find a way to give back to the community that he really loved. So he approached Hope Partnership and said, I'll sell you this land. There's already 4 units built on it. They're market rate housing. Yeah. So it's a very desirable location, and we're going to build 28 new units, all affordable, right next door to the existing 4 units. And we just had a meet and greet out there with the first select woman in Madison recently, and they're very excited about it. They know they have a housing affordability problem. They have even fewer affordable housing than Old Saybrook does, and so they're all on board, and it's a great opportunity for Hope.
How did the town meetings go with the zoning commissions?
Well, there's the beauty of it, Steve. It was already approved.
Wow.
Fully approved for 28 units. Yeah. Approved as market rate housing. But we're not changing any of the design or anything. We're just stepping into it, and we're doing it as affordable. So there was no need to go through any zoning approval process.
That's interesting. So yeah, much more smooth process in this case.
Absolutely.
I'm glad for that experience. I'm glad for that. Which leads us into the a topic that we need to discuss, we need to talk about a little bit. Old Lyme and what happened here in Old Lyme 2 years ago. I can say that it was one of the most discouraging and upsetting things that I've witnessed in this town, and in many ways, it was one of the most upsetting things I've witnessed as an adult. Just witnessing the ways in which it brought out the very worst tendencies in some of our residents, and it was disappointing. But I'm wondering what it was like for you guys. I mean, it was so hard to sit in some of those meetings and to listen to this barrage of complaints. What was it like for you guys? I mean, I know that you had invested an enormous amount of time and capital and imagination into making this project
Yeah.
work. Um,
Yeah, we definitely learned lessons from
yeah,
the whole experience. And, we knew going into it that it is probably going to be a challenging proposal. And some people will still to this day argue that that's not a great location for what we wanted to do. And, we were willing to listen to those criticisms, and we were willing to work with people to come up with some mitigation for how we could make it better.
right,
But at the end of the day, and I've done a lot of affordable housing development all over the country. I don't think there's ever a perfect site for building affordable housing. There's always going to be something wrong with any site you pick, whether it be it's next to, a shopping center, it's next to a railroad track, it's next to the highway, whatever it is. And the fact of the matter is, to get the ideal site is going to be cost prohibitive. Because if it's an ideal site, it's going to sell at a much higher price. So you tend to see affordable housing built in places that may not necessarily be the best location you can find.
yes,
That's just by definition. Tends to be because of the economics of it. So we knew there were some challenges with the site, but we thought they were, and we still feel that they were manageable and could be mitigated. And I just think there was people using social media, and there was some opposition that was very well capitalized, and it tended to bring out some of the worst qualities in people. And I still believe it was a minority, and that most of the people I've talked to in Old Lyme support the idea. I think what was most disheartening was those of us who were volunteers trying to do this because we think it's a good thing to do and it's helping our neighbors, were criticized and called names and accused of doing things that were crazy. And so that was the part that was hard. But at the end of the day, we did learn from it, and I think hopefully that the town and some of the residents learned from it, and maybe there is some effort to revisit the idea at a different location someday. I'm not sure we're ready to do that just yet, but perhaps that's in the cards down the road.
perhaps. I mean, I know that would be an enormous act of faith on your part after all that you went through during those hearings and in the aftermath. So, yeah, I don't blame you for kind of going, let's slow down. We'll slow down.
Do something else for a little while. Yeah.
Would you be willing to talk a little bit about some of the aftermath of that? I mean, the town did ultimately vote to approve it.
That's right.
But then it got taken to court.
That's right.
And ultimately, it was Hope that said, you know what, for financial reasons and probably for other reasons as well, we need to withdraw this project. And I know you wrote a letter to the town. Would you be willing to share or talk about that decision a little bit?
Yeah, I think it came down to economics more than anything. I think we all believed that ultimately we would prevail if we really wanted to push it forward, and that it would be upheld in court. But the question is, do we really want to go into a situation where we are unwelcome and put the future residents of the project in a position where they may not feel welcome living there?
Right.
And I think we all just concluded that at the end of the day, our resources and time might be spent better elsewhere, at least for the foreseeable future.
Right.
So it was a hard decision, and there were definitely board members at Hope and supporters of Hope who wanted us to keep going, keep fighting. But we ultimately ran out of money, and we spent a great deal of money on lawyers and accountants and engineers and architects, and it really hurt the organization financially.
Yes.
At the end of the day.
That's a really interesting, being able to foresee that, this might bode ill for people who might move into that complex in the future, and therefore it actually might be in their interest not to move this forward. I think is a really sad but thoughtful consideration.
I'm told there's a committee that's been formed.
Yeah.
In Old Lyme, and they're looking at ways that they could find new opportunities, which I think is great, and I hope that they are successful in doing that.
Yeah. I couldn't tell you too much about it, but yeah, I hope that they're successful as well. You mentioned some of the financial challenges that came up as a result of this, and you shared with me yesterday that it really was damaging to Hope's bottom line, to the point that there's not even an ability at the moment to rehire an executive director.
Right.
Can you talk about that a little bit more? I mean, that's a piece of the story that I had no idea about and hadn't thought through the ramifications
right.
Down line. In my imagination, it was, Hope, just decided this wasn't going to be workable and moved on, but without considering the vast outlay of money.
Yeah.
Went into this whole thing.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize it. And, Hope we had formed this something called the Hope Chest, which was a pot of money that we had, kind of grew through fundraising efforts over the years, including when Hope merged with Old Lyme Affordable Housing 4 or 5 years ago. They had some capital that went into the Hope Chest.
Yeah.
And so that was the money that was there to spend on potential new projects, to pay the fees to architects and engineers to acquire land. And, at the beginning of the process, we had almost $100,000 in that Hope Chest. And sadly, we kind of burned through all of it and had to dip into Hope's operating account to cover some of the bills as well.
Yeah.
So our executive director left. She left for other reasons. She wanted to get a full-time position with insurance. So she left, and we haven't been able to afford to bring on a replacement for her because of that. So we're slowly getting things back together, with the Essex and Madison projects, where, that will eventually help us stabilize and bring in some dollars. And we have support from United Way and some other funders, but it's a struggle right now.
Yeah. Well, we can talk offline about how our church can help rebuild the Hope Chest as well.
That'd be great.
Contribute to that. I feel a sense of responsibility for what happened in Old Lyme. So I do want to participate in helping to rebuild whatever was in that fund. We can talk about that a little bit after this conversation offline. Let's I don't know. We need to wrap this up pretty soon here, but I guess I want to ask about what you think are the greatest impediments in people's minds to understanding the need for affordable housing and what it actually is. I mean, what do we need to be doing to be persuading our neighbors in our communities that this is actually a really wonderful, helpful, good thing that will improve our communities as opposed to. Yeah.
I mean, I tell you, the whole George Floyd thing was a horrible thing, and it really brought out an awareness that people have now that they didn't have before around diversity and inclusiveness. And I see this as a real moment where organizations like Hope can really make a difference in a tangible way. And I think there's a inclination that a lot of us feel angry. We want to march. We want to post on our social media our feelings, and that all helps. It helps. Probably mostly it helps us feel good about ourselves. But, there's really, I think the next logical step is to find a way to get involved, either by running for office or volunteering or making financial contributions to organizations that are really doing something about the problem.
Yeah, yeah.
And I feel hopeful that, that in these times that hope will be able to show that it can really make a difference.
Yeah. I think what you point to, this notion that many communities are awakening not only to the structural injustices, but to the possibility that that increasing diversity, increasing the opportunities for people to live in our communities is actually a great thing. It's actually
Right.
something that's gonna make strengthen and really enhance our communities. I think there is something to that.
Absolutely.
And I hope people will, little by little, awaken to the possibility that can come true.
I do too.
Well, listen, let's end this by just, I don't know, let's talk a little bit about like what are the next steps for Hope, do you think? I mean, there's Madison, there's Essex. I mean, do you have anything else on the horizon that you can talk about? Or maybe it's not, maybe your hands are full with 2 projects right now.
Yeah, no, we got our plate pretty full right now. But I would love it if you could get the word out to your congregation that we're always looking for volunteers. We're always looking for a helping hand. And if people want to get involved, you can go to our website, go to our Facebook page, come to any of our meetings, are completely open to the public and fully transparent.
Right.
But we always welcome more ideas and more bodies.
Cool. Last question. What's the reach of Hope? What's the geographical region that Hope services?
That's a great question, Steve. We don't actually have, in our bylaws, we don't actually have a defined region, but we tend to be focused mostly from Old Lyme and Madison, and then up to maybe as far as Haddam, Killingworth area. We are doing some education advocacy work in Killingworth right now.
Okay.
We were invited in by the Chamber of Commerce to talk to them about it, and they found some money to cover some of our costs there.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're open to. I don't think there's any restrictions on it. It's really where the opportunities are. Obviously, we don't want to get too crazy and go too far afield.
Right.
It is truly a regional problem. Yeah. Because someone who lives in Old Lyme but works in Old Saybrook, or vice versa, it's not just a problem for each and every town to solve on its own. It's a regional problem, and it needs a regional solution.
And maybe a state solution too.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. I just read in the Connecticut Post this morning about how more and more towns are confronting this problem. That there have been, I think, over the last 2 decades, the article said that there have been 36 towns that have tried to kill affordable housing within their towns. For all the reasons that you cite, preserving the character, all this kind of stuff. But the net effect is that it has made Connecticut a very, very segregated state. So anyway, that's all to say that I am so grateful for Hope and for your work and for the work of the organization. I think it's an extraordinary organization. So thank you.
We appreciate all the support from your church. It's been part of what's kept us going.
Well, good. Well, listen, let's close this out, and I'll just say thank you so much again for being a part of this conversation, and for leading the charge, even when it's really, really painful, as it has been in places like Old Lyme. But I'm so glad that the organization's moving forward, and I continue to wish you and Hope a lot of success. And let's talk a little bit later about how our church can help partner with that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Steve.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Tony. All right. And that brings us to the end. Folks, I hope you were able to tune into that. And thank you so much for watching. And again, thank you to Hope for being a part of this incredibly important work. I hope you're doing well out there. I hope to see you soon, and love to all of you. In this time of Corona, we're still in the time of Corona. For some people, it doesn't feel like it. We're still in it, though. Take care and see you soon.